Hello everyone, and welcome to tonight's community meeting for Bus Network Redesign. My name is Reagan Checchio, and I will be serving as the moderator for tonight's meeting. Next slide. I would like to note that all MBTA activities, including public meetings, are free of discrimination. The MBTA complies with all federal, state civil rights requirements preventing discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, limited English proficiency, and additional protected characteristics. We welcome the diversity from across our entire service area. If you have any questions or concerns, please visit mbta.com/Title 6. That's Title VI to reach the Office of Diversity and Civil Rights. Next slide. I would also like to remind everyone of the rules for participating in this meeting, as well as remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded. While we wish we were able to do this meeting in person, we're hoping that we have designed an online public meeting that will be interactive and provide an opportunity for us to have a conversation together. Before we can begin that conversation, I do want to review a few technical aspects of the Zoom platform. Next slide. We have ASL interpreters tonight for the meeting. If you would like to view the ASL interpreter at all times, keep your view settings in gallery mode. To pin the interpreter's video, click the ellipses in the top right corner of the interpreter's video and select Pin Video. You will need to repeat this process each time we switch interpreters. We also have an interpreters tonight who are translating the meeting into Spanish and Mandarin. If you require these services, please click the interpretation button on your screen, the globe icon, and select which language you wish to hear. In addition, we will be holding small discussions later this meeting, meeting by region. If you would like to be in a Spanish language or Mandarin language discussion, please message a project team member in the chat so we can move you into the appropriate discussion section at that time. At this moment, I will ask all English speakers to please select English as their chosen language. This will allow you to hear translated non-English comments during the Q&A. Next slide. You can view closed captions by clicking the closed captions feature and selecting from the options shown. Show subtitle will display a caption at the bottom of the screen. View full transcript will display the meeting's audio transcription in a window to the right. Next slide. All attendees are muted during the presentation to prevent excessive background noise. If you are viewing this meeting on a computer, please toggle speaker view to see the presentation more prominently. If you are on a smartphone, swipe to change views. You may use the chat button to submit a typed question or comment at any point during the meeting. The chat is not open, but if you direct your question to the Ask a Question, we will receive the comment and question. We will be monitoring the chat during the presentation, but ask that you hold all your substantive comments and questions for the breakout session or question and answer session that we will be having later in the meeting. If you have a technical problem, please share your issue in the chat feature at any point during the meeting, and we will respond as quickly as possible. And I'll note that all project team staff members are listed with project team next to their names in the participant list. Okay, so the questions that you submit are not going to be visible to attendees once submitted, but we will try to get to as many as possible during the Q&A portion of the meeting. And during the breakout room discussions, the chat will be visible to everyone, and we encourage you to keep any comments in the chat respectful to other attendees. If you use inappropriate language, you will be removed from the meeting. If you have a technical problem, please share your issue in the chat during the meeting. And now, after all of that, I would like to introduce Justin Antos from the MBTA. He is the Senior Director of Bus Transformation, and he will give some opening remarks. Justin?
Thanks, Reagan. Good evening. As Reagan said, my name is Justin Antos. I'm the Director of Bus Transformation here at the T. I'm excited to be here tonight to kick off this meeting for our Bus Network Redesign. Why am I excited? Because transit is essential to the region's economy, especially post-pandemic. And MBTA buses serve our most transit-dependent population. Bus ridership at the MBTA was the most resilient during COVID, stronger even today than many rail services. But our region has changed significantly over the past few years and decades, and our bus network needs to rise to the challenge and change with it. It's essential that the T's bus network adapts to how, where, and when people travel today. Back in May, we released a draft map, a proposal for service, and all last summer, and including this fall, we've received over 20,000 public comments on it. We've reviewed all of those comments. We've read them all. And we've had dozens of meetings with cities, municipalities, residents, elected officials, neighborhood groups, many, many meetings over the past few months. And we said during that time that we would make meaningful changes to our service proposal based on what we heard from you. And we're here tonight to tell you about the changes that we made, what we heard, and what we're doing about it. Now, a note, the public comment period for this proposal has ended. The goal here tonight is for us to explain what we heard and how we are changing it in response. And our goals for the overall project remain the same. It is still to create a better bus network, a more equitable service for our riders, and to transform the entire bus system by creating routes that are more frequent and connect to more places. How do we do that? Well, we do it by increasing service. We still plan to increase service by 25% across the network when we are done. We are challenged by a bus operator hiring shortage, but we have plans to respond to that. We also plan to provide hundreds of thousands of riders with higher frequency service. That's a high frequency service we define as a bus stopping at your stop every 15 minutes or better, 7 days a week, all day long. Now, to make these improvements, we had to make trade-offs and consider changes. We weren't able to make all the changes that you requested of us, but we ultimately made changes to about 2/3 of the routes in the service proposal you will hear about tonight. So the revised network map that we will present to you now is, I think, a better plan and a more equitable bus system for current and future bus riders. It reflects the changing travel needs with more frequent service, more reliable service, and better connection. And I just wanted to close by saying thank you. Thank you for being here tonight to help us build a better bus network. This is our bus system. It is not the MBTA's bus system. It is not yours alone. Everyone here, including me, including all of the MBTA staff here tonight, ride the bus and care about the bus very deeply. Now, back to Doug Johnson, project manager.
Thank you, Justin. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. As Justin mentioned, my name is Doug Johnson, and I am the project manager for Bus Network Redesign. Tonight's meeting will begin with a brief presentation about Bus Network Redesign and the changes that have been made to the proposal that we published back in May. As Justin mentioned, and as you know, back in May, we published a draft network map and we solicited public feedback on it through September. We ultimately received over 20,000 comments on the draft proposal, and we've incorporated that feedback into a revised network map that we will present to you tonight. I will give a general overview of the changes that were made, and then we will move into breakout rooms where project team members will give presentations about the changes made to specific areas of the network. In those breakout rooms, you will have the opportunity to ask questions about the changes that were made. After about 40 minutes, we will return to the main Zoom room for a question and answer session. At the start of Q&A, we will call on elected officials to make comments first. If you are not able to stay for the whole meeting, but would like to leave a comment about the revised bus network, you can either post a comment in the chat and we will add it to our records, or you can submit a comment through our online comment form. A link to that form will be posted in the chat. Folks may be familiar with the Better Bus project, but I'll give you a brief description of this effort and how Bus Network Redesign fits into it. The Better Bus project is a series of integrated projects across the MBTA that seek to transform and modernize the entire bus system to create more reliable service and a better rider experience. It includes the Bus Network Redesign, the ongoing effort to modernize our bus maintenance facilities and decarbonize the fleet, build bus transit priority infrastructure throughout the network, make all bus stops accessible, provide more bus stop amenities like shelters, benches, and lighting, improve the distribution of information to riders about buses when they will arrive at stops and about route changes, as well as change the way that the MBTA collects fares on our system. Bus Network Redesign is one piece of that larger effort, and it informs those other efforts by telling us where bus service will go and when, how many operators we'll need, how many buses we'll need, where new bus stops will need to be located, and where we will need to install bus transit priority, things like bus lanes and traffic lights that are specifically for transit vehicles. So the Bus Network Redesign project specifically is an effort to reimagine the entire bus network so that it better reflects the needs of the region today. As folks know, over the last few years and many decades, the region has changed a lot. People are living in areas that used to be industrial. There are new job centers that exist now that didn't exist a decade or two earlier. Travel patterns have changed, both because of COVID and they were changing before COVID. But the bus network that exists right now doesn't do a good job of addressing that demand and those travel patterns, where people want to go and when they want to go there. The bus network hasn't really changed very much in about 50 years. So this effort seeks to redesign it so that it better meets the needs of the region, so that we provide service to the places that people want to go, when people want to get there, and we provide service that is frequent and reliable. A good example of that, as you know, right now, the bus network is really focused on providing service on weekday mornings and weekday evenings. But obviously people travel all day, every day, not just for work on weekday mornings and evenings. People have all different kinds of hours and all different reasons to travel around. We want to make sure that the bus network meets all of those needs. Our first goal is to create a more equitable network. This is about providing more service and more reliable service to the people who are the most dependent on public transit, including low-income populations, households with few or no vehicles, seniors, people with disabilities, and communities of color that do not have equal access to public transit. We want to create more frequent service in busy neighborhoods, more all-day service that runs all day, every day, whether it's a weekday or a weekend, and is frequent and reliable regardless of the time of day. We want to create new connections to more places, including all those non-downtown job centers that exist now that didn't exist a decade or two ago. We want to make the network simpler and easier to use. As folks know, right now, sometimes if you get on a bus, it may not go to the same place it usually goes to, depending on the time of day or the day of the week. We want to make sure that the network is easier to navigate and that routes do consistent things so that you don't have to worry about what time of day it is or what day of the week it is, whether that bus is going to get you home or not. We want the network to be consistent and reliable enough that folks can show up to a bus stop without having to check the schedule to confirm that that bus is going to come on time or get them to where they need to go. We also want to implement more transit priority, as I mentioned, and other infrastructure across the network to improve reliability and accessibility. Many of the bus stops in the current network are not accessible. They're not compliant with the American with Disabilities Act, and there are a lot of challenges for folks who are trying to use the bus network at those locations. These are things that we seek to address through this effort as part of our overall goal of transforming and improving the bus network. We've developed a revised network proposal using service design principles and the public feedback that we collected over the summer and the fall. In general, our principles are to prioritize frequency over one-seat rides, create more rapid transit connections and more crosstown routes, focus on all-day service, combine routes to create high-frequency corridors, minimize route variations, and minimize deviations on high-frequency routes. But service design principles only get us so far, of course, and so does the analysis of quantitative data. That's the cell phone data that we use to develop the initial network and other metrics like ridership and things that can be quantified or counted. We know that that alone is not enough to design a bus network. Public feedback is a really important component and has to be incorporated into the network to ensure that it actually meets people's needs. We told everyone at the beginning of this process that we would make meaningful changes to the draft network based on the feedback that we received, and we have. The revised bus network would still increase service by 25% across the network versus pre-pandemic service. We would still double the number of high-frequency corridors. Those are buses coming every 15 minutes or better all day, 7 days a week. And when we say 15 minutes or better, the goal is for that to be the worst that that service would be. Some routes would come every 4 minutes during rush hour, or every 6 minutes, or every 8 minutes. There are routes in the network today that come that frequently during rush hour, and that we do not intend to change. But what we want to do is make sure that those really frequent routes are really frequent all day, every day. The existing key bus routes that we have, those are our most frequent routes. Their frequency varies. During peak periods is when they are most frequent. Their frequency is more consistent than other routes in the network, but it is still less frequent midday and on weekends. The map on the left on this slide shows the key bus routes. The map on the right shows the new high frequency corridors that would be created by this plan. You can see that communities like Chelsea, Everett, Medford, Malden, Lynn, Waltham, South Boston, Roxbury, Dorchester, West Roxbury, Quincy, many of these communities gain high frequency service that they don't have today. So this is really about creating a network that provides more equitable service across the region and better service for everyone who uses buses. Based on the feedback that we received over the summer and the fall, we ended up making changes to about 2/3 of the routes in the proposal. We changed 85 of 133 routes. The changes that we made range from things like making small changes to routes to making complete changes to routes, including taking routes that exist today and putting them back in the proposal as they exist today or pre-pandemic. So the types of changes really range from those small changes, depending on the feedback, to wholesale changes to routes. I'll talk more about those in the next few slides, and then the facilitators and breakout rooms will walk through each route in the respective area that breakout room is associated with and talk about those changes. There were 5 main reasons why we made changes. The first was to respond to public feedback that we received on the draft map. The second was to improve access to hospitals, senior centers, grocery stores, shopping malls, and other destinations. The third was to reduce the walk distances, specifically for seniors, riders with disabilities, and riders with mobility challenges, and especially in locations with really challenging terrain or pedestrian conditions. I mentioned the service design principles earlier, where we said we wanted to focus on more frequent service and combining services so that they'd be more frequent. The trade-off with doing that is that there are situations in which we would be asking folks to walk further to get to a bus stop than they have to walk today in order to have a much better service. We heard a lot of feedback about that specifically from folks on the draft map, and we looked at those situations where folks said that increased walking distance would be a hardship and a barrier to accessing the service for them. So we took that feedback to heart and we adjusted many of our routes to reduce those walking distances in situations where folks told us it would be too much of a hardship or barrier to accessing the service. The fourth reason was to preserve some existing one-seat rides to certain destinations. In the draft network, one of the things that we were doing was creating a network of really high frequency routes. But a trade-off with that is that in some cases, a route that you have today, that's a one-seat ride, meaning you get on a bus, it takes you from point A to point B without you having to transfer or get on a different bus. That's a one-seat ride. In the draft network that we had proposed, there were some situations where existing one-seat rides would be broken up into a two-seat ride. So you would have to transfer from one service to another. If those two routes are very frequent and very reliable, then it won't impact your travel time very much to have to make that transfer. But we know that there are locations where transferring from one service to another can be really challenging or can be a big increase in the amount of time that you're spending getting from point A to point B. So we reviewed all the feedback that we received a lot of feedback about that specifically, and we took a really close look at that and ultimately decided that in some situations, it was better to put a one-seat ride back into the network. And I think a good example of that is the Route 39 from Jamaica Plain to Copley and Back Bay. We had proposed the 39 going from Jamaica Plain into Cambridge, but we heard a lot of feedback on it and decided ultimately to revert it back to what it does today. So the 39 would continue to do what it does today. If folks want to travel to Cambridge from JP, there are other options in this new network for them to transfer from the 39 to our new 47 or other routes. But that's an example where we put back what exists in the network today because of the feedback that we got. And then the fifth reason for changes were to balance our resources and stay within the limits that bound us. There are a maximum number of buses that we can run at any given time. Without increasing the size of the fleet, we can't go beyond that current limit. There's also a maximum amount of service hours, revenue vehicle hours, that we can run and stay within our budget. So that is a hard limit as well, and we had to stay within that. It's still a 25% increase over the pre-pandemic amount of service that we were providing. And I want to be clear on that. We will be providing 25% more service versus what we were providing pre-pandemic, not today. Obviously, as folks know, there is less service provided today because of operator shortage challenges that we are facing right now. So those were limits that we had to stay within. So we were not able to make every single change that was requested of us, but we did our best to respond to as much of the public feedback as we possibly could and really make this a much better network based on the feedback that we received. There are 5 main categories for types of changes that were made. The first was restoring an existing route either to what it does today, either in whole or in part. I'll give you a few examples on this list. The 39 I already mentioned will continue to do what it does today, going from Jamaica Plain to Copley and Back Bay. We put part of the 47 back, but then also extended the 47 in different ways, so it looks slightly different than it does today. The 55 will continue to do what it does today. We had proposed the 55 going to Kendall rather than going from Fenway to Copley, but we heard a lot of feedback on it, and the 55 will continue to do what it does today. I want to be clear that it will not go to Park Street as it did in the past, but it will continue to do what it does today. The 87 and the 89 are routes that we made changes to in response to the feedback that we received. The 201, the 202 are back to in this network doing what they do today. So we rescinded the alternate proposal that we had for those routes. The 354 was not included in the initial proposal that we released in May. That is back in this new network, providing express service from Burlington and Woburn down 93 to Medford Square and into downtown. And then the 505, we had proposed a modification to its routing. We reverted it back to the routing that it has today due to feedback from the city of Needham. So, excuse me, Newton. That's the first category of changes. The second was rerouting routes, making small changes to routes to better connect to medical facilities, senior housing, and other destinations. This is a major theme that we heard in the public feedback. Routes like the T8 and the T12, and I want to note here that the letter T in front of a number means that that will be a high frequency route. It will come every 15 minutes or better all day from 5 a.m. to 1 a.m., 7 days a week. In some cases, those routes are even more frequent during rush hours. So the T8 and the T12, we modified to better connect to Boston Medical Center. The 11 will continue to serve Tufts Medical Center directly. In the draft proposal, we had proposed the 11 stopping at the Broadway Red Line station. But based on feedback that we got from folks, we decided to extend the 11 to Tufts Medical Center. It won't do exactly what it does today. It won't loop through downtown and down A Street, but it will go from South Boston to Tufts Medical Center and back directly. Other routes like the T104, that will do something very different than what it does today. It'll still start at Malden Center, but it will go to East Boston through Everett and Chelsea. We modified that proposal to better serve the grocery store in Chelsea, the Market Basket, and to connect to the Airport Blue Line station. You can see the other routes on this list where there were other small route modifications made to that May proposal in response to this feedback that we got. The third category was adding routes to the proposal that were not in the proposal from May. The 113 is a brand new route that we've added that goes from Chelsea to Assembly Row by way of Everett Square. That was a change we made in relation to some other changes, the 90 in Somerville. The 47 I mentioned is a route we've reintroduced. It will continue to do partly what it does today, but not the entirety of what it does today. If you join the breakout room that covers Cambridge and the surrounding municipalities, you'll hear more about that route. The fourth category of changes was frequency and span adjustments. So that's how often a bus comes, and then span is the hours of the day that it runs. So those are routes where we adjusted the frequency and span, but we didn't adjust the route. And a good example of that is the 504, where we've added some midday service to it, and the SL2. We had proposed making the SL2 peak period only, basically rush hour only on weekdays, but the SL2 will now be a high frequency route 7 days a week. And then the last category were routes that were included in the May proposal that are not in the revised network. An example of this is the Route 20. We had proposed the Route 20 as to do what the 201 and 202 do to some extent. Because we have restored the 201 and the 202, we have rescinded this proposal for the Route 20. So there were a handful of other routes where that was the case. The 350 is an example. We have reintroduced to some extent the Route 80. Now the 80 in this new network will do what we had proposed for the 350, as well as providing a connection between Arlington Center and Somerville that is not covered by the Green Line extension. So there were a small number of routes that had been in the proposal that were removed because of other changes that we made in the network. So those are the main categories. You will hear the actual details of these changes and see maps in the breakout rooms that we'll move to shortly. The revised bus network is now publicly available. You can go to the project website, which is mbta.com/BNRD. On the project website, there is a list of all the changes made to the May 2022 proposal, both an interactive map and a static PDF map that you can look at. And there's a link to the online comment form where folks can leave comments about the revised bus network. All of your comments will be shared with the Bus Transformation Office, which is tasked with implementation of the new network. We are also conducting an equity analysis of the revised bus network. That is underway right now and will be completed by December. That is required of us by the FTA, or it's required of all transit agencies by the FTA when an agency wants to make changes that surpass a certain threshold. Because we are redesigning the entire network, we surpass that threshold and we are required to conduct this equity analysis. There will be a public meeting for that, the results of that equity analysis to present it to the public this winter. The changes that we are proposing to the bus network are not going to happen overnight. We anticipate that it will take a total of 5 years to implement this new network. It will be done in phases as our bus operator headcount allows, beginning in the summer of 2023. Changes will likely be made with the summer service changes each year between 2023 and 2027. There are also a number of capital projects or construction projects that will need to take place in order to make this new network possible. We are in the process of identifying new stop locations where existing stops that are not accessible will need to either be upgraded or relocated so that they can be accessible, as well as where transit priority infrastructure will need to be implemented in order to allow the service to maintain the reliability that we want it to have. Those are things, as I mentioned, like bus lanes and dedicated traffic signals specifically for buses. If you're familiar with the Green Line, you know that the Green Line, the B branch, C branch, D and E, when they're in the roadway or on the surface, there are dedicated signals for them at intersections. So that is something that we will be implementing across the network for buses in places where we want to make bus service more reliable or have it have dedicated roadway space or exclusive time in a signal phase. The work to identify all of those projects and those locations is underway right now. And we are working on a plan to both address the operator shortage that we and many transit agencies across the country are experiencing, as well as the implications for that with the implementation phasing that we are planning right now. That concludes this overview presentation. Before we move to breakout rooms, I just want to say, or leave these resources here for a moment so that folks have the project website. You can see it's the first address there, mbta.com/BNRD. The online feedback form, you can find it on the project website, or you can use the link mbta.com/BNRD feedback. That will take you directly to that online feedback form. And you can learn more about the Better Bus project at that project website, mbta.com/betterbus. Of course, you can continue to email the MBTA as well, your questions and comments. I'll now turn it back over to Reagan Checchio, who will go over how the breakout rooms will work.
Thanks, Doug. So as he mentioned, we're going to be having some presentations in breakout rooms by area to answer your questions about the revised map. Can you go to the next slide, Doug? So on screen, and I will read them out for the benefit of the interpreters, you can see there are breakout rooms cross-referenced by municipality. So breakout room 1 is for Beverly, Chelsea, Danvers, East Boston, Everett, Lynn, Linfield, Malden, Marblehead, Melrose, Nahant, Peabody, Reading, Revere, Salem, Saugus, Stoneham, Swampscott, Wakefield, and Winthrop. Breakout room 2, Arlington, Bedford, Burlington, Cambridge, Lexington, Medford, Somerville, Winchester, Woburn. Breakout room 3 is Boston and Brookline. Breakout room 4 is Belmont, Needham, Newton, Waltham, Watertown. Breakout room 5 is Avon, Braintree, Brockton, Canton, Dedham, Hingham, Holbrook, Hull, Milton, Norwood, Quincy, Randolph, Walpole, Westwood, Weymouth. Thank you for your patience as I went through those. And I will note that although rooms are listed by municipality, routes obviously cross municipal borders, so please join the room that most closely fits your interests. Each breakout room will have a group leader who will give a short overview of the updates to the network, and then they will be available to answer your question and answers about the revised map. If you would like to visit more than one breakout room, you may switch between rooms at any point. You will have to leave that room, come to the main room, and then rejoin with a different breakout room. When you select your breakout room, you're going to look for the number of the breakout room. We've tried to put some of the towns in the naming convention, but it is a little difficult to fit. And so look for the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. I am going to note right now for the facilitators and note takers, we are actually unable to automatically assign you to your rooms. So please join your rooms promptly when we open the breakout room. So you'll need to do that yourself. Apologies to the team. So with that, Amanda, can you pause the recording?
And I'll just start over from there. Welcome back from the breakout rooms, everyone. I know that some of the breakout rooms had a lot of content to go through, and they may not have had a ton of time for Q&A. So we are going to do an open Q&A session now, and we will hopefully be able to get through everybody's comments. We'll start with elected officials, but first I want to acknowledge the fact that this meeting reached the capacity of our Zoom account, which was 300 participants at once in a meeting. We are deeply sorry for that oversight. We know that there were more than 300 people who wanted to attend this meeting. So we will hold another meeting, and we will use a Zoom license that has a higher capacity so that everyone will be able to join the meeting who wants to. So it will be the same content as this meeting. We will get that scheduled as soon as possible. and folks will be able to join that meeting. So we deeply apologize for the inconvenience that folks experienced and for the fact that folks were not able to join this meeting who wanted to. So that was on us, and we will address that by having another meeting and ensuring that our Zoom license is not subject to that same capacity limit. Now I'll turn it over to Reagan Checchio, who will moderate the Q&A.
Thanks, Doug. Terry, can you go to the next slide, please? So as Doug mentioned, we're going to take some questions and comments from elected officials first, and then we'll move into the general question and answer section. So I will ask those who are not elected officials to lower your hands at this time, and there will be time later, and I will call on you then. In the meantime, I see Representative Connolly has been waiting patiently, so I'm going to unmute him now.
Can you hear me? Hello.
We can, thank you.
Terrific. Well, thank you for hosting us this evening. This is State Rep Mike Conley from Cambridge and Somerville. And, I think first I got to say right off the bat, and I want to say for the record, I've actually spent more time in this meeting hearing from constituents who were unable to get into the meeting and emailing me or tweeting at me, or in some cases texting me and asking what's going on, then I really have been able to focus on the substance of the presentation. And I just came from the Somerville Cambridge breakout room where there was not time to answer a single question. And so that breakout room ended with numerous hands raised and not a single question answered. And so, I certainly, having said that, I understand the Bus Network Redesign team has made a lot of efforts, and there is a lot in this second iteration that responds to the hundreds and hundreds of pieces of feedback that you received from Somerville and Cambridge, as well as the 9-page letter that I submitted back in July. But it's almost hard to get into the substance without first addressing these process concerns. I really appreciate the fact that you've stated that your number one priority here is centering equity. But I would also say, if the discussion is about moving from a 1-seat ride to a 2-seat ride with greater frequency of the buses in order to accommodate that change, I think it's going to be up to the MBTA to prove that you could deliver on that promise. And as we heard earlier in the meeting, with the operator hiring shortage, with the challenges that we've seen building new bus garages, I think there's a lot of pieces that need to come into place. So one thing I would ask is that no service be removed, at least until we get an opportunity to see a few things, to see how the fair share amendment and the potential for billions of dollars of more revenue that could go to support the MBTA, how that plays out, to see how the new gubernatorial administration approaches these issues. And then another big thing for my district in particular is not just making assumptions about what the Green Line extension might mean, but to actually allow the Green Line extension to be fully completed, to become fully operational, and to give us an opportunity to actually look at the data and see how, if at all, the Green Line extension is impacting bus ridership. And so to ensure that we don't take bus routes away from East Cambridge or East Somerville without first understanding that. So those are some general concerns. In terms of some specific notes, I heard from a Cambridge School Committee member today who was raising specific concerns around things like the 68 bus. I know we worked to preserve the 68 bus back when it was on the chopping block a couple of years ago. We would like to see the 68 bus maintained through rush hour and not have it only be a daytime only bus, but to be something that continues with frequent service through 8 p.m. And The 68 bus serves one of the neighborhoods of Cambridge with the highest incidence of poverty, with the greatest diversity in the city. And so I think from an equity perspective, any cuts to the 68 bus would raise some serious red flags. Likewise, on the 78 bus, I've already heard feedback from Cambridge officials that there's a desire to extend that into evening rush hour through 8 p.m. On the CT2 bus, I do understand that there's some excellent intentions around that, and I understand that you're now calling the CT2 bus, as I understand it, the 85 bus. But here I am, I'm a state representative, I care deeply about this stuff. And there's so much here, it's hard for me to even keep track of all of it. And so that's why I would again encourage you not just to schedule another meeting, but to consider pushing this entire process back somewhat to delay any federal equity submissions and to really give us here in Somerville and Cambridge the time that we need. Perhaps we should actually have a specific meeting for the city of Somerville and the city of Cambridge. I noticed that our breakout room had close to 130 people out of the 300 people who joined. So clearly there's a tremendous amount of interest here. I could go on and on. I'll yield the floor here momentarily.
Thank you.
I did want to say, the 47 bus seems like a win for our community. The 83 bus, the 89 bus, those seems like important wins, as well as the 87 bus being extended to 1 a.m. So there's a lot here I'm grateful for, but the bottom line is we need another meeting. We might need multiple meetings, and we need a lot of time to communicate and engage to make sure we get this right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Connolly. I appreciate your comments. I see Senator Lovely has her hand up. I'm going to unmute you, Senator.
Thank you. I've transitioned to my car, so I'll be brief. And Representative Kearns is on as well. So I'd like to yield the floor to her, but I just would urge that the 435 bus in Danvers, I'm Senator Joan Lovely, represent Danvers, Beverly, Salem, and Peabody. And the 435 bus in Danvers, the loop into Danvers Square has been cut, and I would urge the T to restore that loop, that 1 mile loop. We have Danvers is a community that is home to many group homes of intellectually disabled adults who rely on that bus service. A lot of those group homes are within the downtown area, and we've heard from constituents who have rely on that transit, and now it's not available to them. So that's what I would urge is the restoration of the loop into Danvers Square on the 435, and I'll yield the floor to the good representative from Danvers. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I don't see Representative Kearns' hand raised. Representative Kearns, if you would like to make comments, please raise your hand and I can recognize you. Okay. All right. I see some other people with their hands raised, but I also know that it's time to go into Q&A and people have been waiting very patiently all evening. Oh, someone's, yes.
State Representative Sally Kearns has her hand raised.
She does. I'm sorry, Representative. Let me unmute you. Representative.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I do have 4 friends, constituents who have spent the time to be heard tonight. I will yield. I will just reiterate that the 435 loop through Danvers Square, as Senator Lovely said, is very important to us in Danvers. We are an underserved community. Thank you. And I also want to echo the comments and concerns about process that were shared by Mike Conley, of my colleague in Cambridge. And with that, I will yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated for your comments. All right, so as you can see on screen, I am not going to go through all of the different ways you can ask questions or make comments. If you want to raise your hand or make a comment in the Ask a Question Now section, or as Amanda just posted in the chat, there's also a feedback form you can leave comments in. I will request that everybody make their comments very brief, under 2 minutes this evening. I don't want to cut people off, but I know that there's a lot of people who've been waiting for time this evening. So I will start with Diane Smith. Diane?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, during our breakout session number 3, it appears that the Boston Transportation Department is going to decide what happens with bus route number 7 instead of the MBTA. So I have a recommendation that somebody be required to attend the next visit, the next meeting that you hold from the Boston Transportation Department, so they can answer questions about what is going on with the number 7 bus. And that's my recommendation. And my question is, does anyone know if the Boston Transportation Department is accepting comments concerning the route of the number 7 bus? Thank you.
Thank you, Diane, for your question. I'd like to clarify a point here. We have proposed for the Route 7 that it will go from South Boston through downtown, connecting to the South Station and North Station, and then going through Charlestown to Sullivan Square. We have proposed a routing for that route through downtown, but the city of Boston has a planning effort underway called the North Station to Seaport Multimodal Corridor. That planning process is identifying the ideal location for bus lanes through downtown, connecting North Station to South Station. And we are coordinating with the city of Boston and that effort as it moves forward. There are many locations in the network where municipalities, who are often the roadway owners in cases where we're running service, there are many situations in which municipalities are conducting planning processes that will have an impact on the future bus network.
Okay, who's speaking now?
This is Doug Johnson. I'm the project manager for Bus Network.
Hi, Doug. Okay, Doug. So since you know where the bus is going, do you know what street into downtown Boston it's going the furthest up into downtown? Do you know the street name?
So right now we are showing the 7 going on Summer Street to South Station, and then using Congress Street and Post Office, Pearl Street and Congress Street through Post Office Square, and then going up Congress Street to North Station, and then over the North Washington Street Bridge into Charlestown.
Okay, so it's not going as far as it used to go into downtown Boston. And I see that as a problem, but okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to Robin Forrest, who has been having difficulty raising a hand and messaged me some minutes ago. Robin, are you able to unmute?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much. I use the 441 bus route. That's my main route that takes me to and from work, that takes me to my doctor's offices, that takes me to shopping in Vinnon Square. According to the plan, you're doing away with 441 completely. So this is like a huge hardship for me. I don't know why you think, or the MBTA thinks, that putting more buses on the 442 and taking away a route that will take away from other people would be beneficial, because this is not an improvement for me. And I just, like I said, this is like a huge hardship for me. And I kept submitting comments and surveys trying to get someone to listen. And also, I don't get it, because some people go from Marblehead and they get off at Paradise Road and Swampscott to take the Swampscott commuter rail. So everybody doesn't have to get on Lynn on the commuter rail to get to Boston. But then you're making it so everybody has to go from Marblehead or Swampscott into Lynn to get on the commuter rail to get into Boston. So it's like people didn't ask questions before they redid this plan. Because like I said, this is a huge hardship for me. I'm in my 50s. I use public transportation. I don't have a car. I don't drive. you're taking all the doctor's offices are on Paradise Road. I mean, nothing's gonna go down there. I'm gonna have to take lifts or, taxis everywhere. This is very expensive. I just wish you'd reconsider that. I mean, why put more buses on 442 if you're gonna take it away from another route? I don't get it. I just, you're taking away from Peter to pay Paul, but you're making, some people, get the lottery and other people, you get the shaft. So I just wish you'd reconsider that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Doug, I don't know if we want to.
Melissa, are you able to talk more to the 442 and 455?
Talk about the 441 that you want to cancel. That's what I would appreciate.
Can speak to the 441. The proposal was that we would combine the resources from the 441 and 442, which today we have the two different branches. Sometimes it takes the more inland route, and sometimes it takes the more coastal route. And having that branch structure adds a lot of complexity, and we recognize that some people are using those different routes, but what we were trying to do is make more frequent service, more legible service, because sometimes, especially in the middle of the day, you end up with buses that are every 90 minutes. And we were trying to say, well, what does it take? What would it take to make it so that we could build the Marblehead services so that they came, every hourly or better consistently? So that was the intention. I know there's a lot of people.
Thank you, Melissa. Yeah, I think we're going to go on. Amber McMahon, I'm going to unmute you.
Hi, how are you?
Hello. Thank you for waiting.
Just a quick comment and question. First off, I was told that someone would get back to me about my correspondences and comments in previous meetings and certified letters that were sent, and they have not yet to date. And I was wondering if someone was going to be doing that. And then also, what are the hours and the frequency of the 54 on Pleasant Street?
Melissa, I'll defer to you.
I'm checking my notes for the 54. So with the frequency change, as I'd mentioned in the breakout group too, we'd originally proposed it would be medium frequency, but with the new schedule that is slated to be mostly hourly from 7 days a week, from 6 a.m. till 7 p.m. and then a little less frequent later in the evenings until 10 o'clock.
Okay, so, and is that every hour? What?
Approximately hourly for the most part of the day, for the bulk of the day. That's correct.
Thank you, Melissa and Amber. I'm going to move on to Hannah Belcher. Hannah, you should be able to mute.
Hi, my name is Eileen and I just got unmuted. So if I have an opportunity to speak, I would like to. I know you were asking for Hannah, but I think I got the lucky draw. So I'd like to make a couple of comments, please.
Certainly, I'm not sure what happened to Hannah, but we will find her. But thank you, Eileen. Go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to give kudos to Rep. Mike Conley. I feel the same way he does, and I believe that there's so much that one has to divide to get answers for a specific location that it would be very helpful for folks to possibly spend time in our communities and give individual breakdowns of what's actually happening in our neighborhood regarding our services. I also would like to mention, more buses, but we are cutting services, and that's not equitable. And I also feel very the same way as there were other folks speaking regarding number 7 services in South Boston, and we had a very big group, and I had my hand raised, and I also put chat questions, and I did not have an opportunity to respond. So just like many others tonight, I believe that you're trying to accommodate too many of us with our concerns and answers, and I really think that you could consider coming into our neighborhoods and giving us opportunities to fully understand what your plan is. And it is very concerning that for Boston, you're telling us it's BTD to determine, and so we really do need to have both you and BTD present. That would be helpful.
Thank you so much for your comments. I am going to, I see Hannah has her hand raised again. I'm going to try that one more time. My apologies for whatever happened technologically, Hannah.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm Hannah Belcher. I'm a town councilor in Winthrop, Mass. And I did make comments in our specific breakout section, so I'll save those. But I'd just like to agree with what Rep. Connolly mentioned about potentially waiting on moving this forward until a new administration is in place and we see the way they're going to change funding or priorities. And I also just wanted to make a comment on the way the data was looked at big data with cell phones. And I understand in the city that can be incredibly helpful because you have such a large sample size. When you get into areas like Winthrop and some of the smaller communities outside of the city, I think that it would behoove the MBTA to look through a different lens at those communities to make sure we're not disadvantaging areas like Point Shirley neighborhood in Winthrop, and I'm sure there are other surrounding towns a little further out of Boston that experience the same thing. So I just wanted to make that point.
I thank you. I appreciate your comments tonight. I'm going to keep going with the raised hands. I will note for those of you who are making comments in the chat, we are capturing them all and they will be part of the record, even if they are not read out loud tonight. And I'm going to go to Daniel Landers next.
Okay, thank you. My name is Daniel Landers. I am a citizen and a resident of Danvers. I'd just like to state that as somebody who suffers from epilepsy and autism, I did heavily rely on the 465 Danvers Square bus route, as it would often take me to Salem when I needed to, or Peabody when I needed to, or just around the town in general. It would also take me to the train station, which I would actually have liked to use since I recently graduated from UMass and would have liked to visit my school again. I just want to state that a lot of people like me who cannot drive due to their disabilities or any other ailments or inflictions do heavily rely on public transportation and do heavily rely on the bus, and specifically that bus route as well.
Thank you so much for your comments. I also know that there are some questions people are having, and Doug, I just want to make sure that I'm saying everything right here, that the meeting recording tonight will be posted along with, if the recordings went well, all of the recordings from the breakout sessions. And we do plan to also post the meeting deck and summary, correct? Or the meeting deck, rather.
That's right. We will be posting the recording of the meeting. We hopefully recorded all of the breakout rooms, and we will post the recordings from those as well. And that will all be available on the project website. There's an event page for this event. We will post all of those there.
Okay, thank you. And also, I know some people say they can't see all the chat comments. That is true, but in the final, we are capturing them all in a final report. So no worries there. I also know some people have been messaging me having some difficulty with the raised hand feature. So I'm
Reagan, you might have unmuted yourself.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn to Judith Jacobs because I know she messaged me a while ago having difficulties. I'm going to unmute Judith. Judith, are you
Yes,
able to?
can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi. Hi, Reagan. Thank you so much for acknowledging me. I know this has probably been a difficult challenge tonight, and that a lot of people tried to get on. So my question is, there is a resident that reached out to me who couldn't get on either. And she's concerned about the route, the bus line that is 80 and 90, which I believe the folks from Clarendon Hill, actually in Somerville. So I'm from Somerville. I'm a Somerville resident. And her specific question was with regard to if the previous stops will then be reinstated or they won't be. So I think she just needs some clarification on that because she is kind of spearheading this in the neighborhood to, try to help the residents to understand the changes. So if you could maybe talk a little bit about that. Hello?
Doug, I'm sorry, Doug, I'll turn to you.
I was wondering if you could clarify which stops are being reinstated. I'm sorry, I'm just not following.
Okay, well, see, I don't use the bus lines either, but I'm someone that has gone to many meetings in the city. I've been very active that way. I also want to give some credit to our Representative Connolly for, pointing out some things that really needed to be said. I'm glad that he did address that. So the question is about the bus lines number 80 and 90. And apparently there was some maybe discussion or confusion surrounding whether or not those routes will be subject to changes or they're apparently been changed. And she wanted to know whether they would resort to the previous routes that they had been doing. So that's all I have. I'm sorry. I don't know any specific information. She sent me a text and wanted me to relay that question to all of you.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. We talked about this in our breakout group number 2, and we also have maps and other information on our website at mbta.com/BNRD for anyone who wasn't able to make it into this meeting. In the case of the 80, we do have a new version of the 80 proposed, so it would be different than the existing 80. There's portions of the route in Somerville primarily from Ball Square and into Leechmere, where we are not proposing to have the 80 continue once the future Green Line opens, but we are proposing that the outer portion of the 80 from Arlington Center and Boston Ave and College Ave into Davis Square would be part of the Route 80 that we have on the new map. And we would actually have it extend out to Burlington to be a sort of substitute for the 350. So be sure to look at our new proposal for the Route 80. And the 90 is proposed to have better frequency than today's 90. It's also proposed to be extended beyond Davis Square, where it terminates today, out to Clarendon Hill, so that it becomes sort of a combination 88/90 with better frequency every 20 minutes for most of the day, maybe every 30 minutes later into the evening, and that would be 7-day a week service. And we have some other changes around circulation at Sullivan and Assembly. So be sure to look at the map there as well.
Thanks, Melissa. I appreciate that. Terry, do you mind going to the next screen just so folks have it? And I also want to confirm, I know this meeting was supposed to end earlier, but Doug, we're going to keep going, right? And answer some more questions.
Yes, we are.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to turn to Julie Kelly next. Julie, are you able to unmute yourself?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I take that bus into work and I heard they're going to change the times to start later in the morning. And
Julie, if I can interrupt, you faded out right when you said what route number. Do you mind repeating it?
Can you hear me?
You're breaking up. Can you try it one more time?
Yep, can you hear me now?
Yes.
And we
All right, I've lost
ready in the
you
morning,
again.
and that bus is gonna change to run later in the day. Is there any way to fix that so it will stay the same so that we could get, which on the way home is standing room only already when we take the 3:30 bus home, the time 3:30.
So you were breaking up a little bit. Can you
Okay.
confirm you're saying the 3:54? Is that right?
Yes,
Perfect. Melissa?
3:54, the bus times are gonna change, and it's not really helpful because it's running later at night. I mean, running at 4 o'clock instead of 3:30. And on the way home, it's standing room only at 3:30 already. The buses, people are standing on the way home. The bus is already full. It
Okay.
used to leave at 2:45 in the afternoon. Now it's starting to leave at 4. And in the morning, people start at 6:30 and it's gonna start leaving the route at 6. People are gonna be late for work. Some of us on the bus, we get about 20, 30 people in the morning on the bus in the morning going that who have to be in work at 6:30. And when we get out, we wait a half hour for the bus, which no problem. We don't mind waiting. But 4 o'clock it'd be too crowded. It's already standing room only. We get like 10, 15 people standing usually on the way home already.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate the comments.
Thanks for flagging that. That's something we can have the service planning team if there are bypasses and crowding issues. That doesn't have to be a bus network redesign thing. That's the type of change that we make as part of our ongoing quarterly service change. So I can flag that for the team and have them take a look.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm going to turn to Ramey Parker next.
Hi, thank you. I just have a quick comment and a quick question. I got some of my answers in the breakout room, but here in Stoneham, for the proposed route, you showed for the capital and everything, a 2023 to 27 plan. I just want to know if you would be establishing number bus routes for that. So who's in 23 and who's in 27? That's the first question. And to Rep. Conley's comment about needing more time, I have to say, I've been involved in this Better Bus Network Redesign program since 2018. And so 4 years later, we're still not boots on the ground. So I just want to make a comment that there's been a lot of outreach done by this team, and I support moving forward. That being said, is it possible to have individual members reach out to each of these towns just to have a conversation? Because I feel like there's a lot of stress and anxiety going on in this meeting, and I feel bad for everybody, but I really just want to try to move forward, and I don't want this to be stalled any longer. So thank you.
Thanks for your comment. We are working on the implementation plan right now and figuring out what routes would be implemented in those earlier years and what would likely be in later years. It will be dependent on our bus operator headcount, which is something that we are working on right now. The MBTA actually just changed the hiring practices for bus operators. We used to require people to have CDLs before they could become a bus driver. Now we're helping folks get the commercial driver's license who want to be bus operators. So we are working to address the operator shortage, which is going to be a key thing to work on in order to implement these service changes. But we are working on the implementation plan right now, which will determine sort of what we do each year. Obviously, we'll provide advance notice before any changes happen, but certainly hear you on the timeline of this and how long these planning processes sometimes can take. So we're working on the implementation plan now, and we'll have more information in the next few months about what the first few phases of implementation will look like.
Doug, I know some people have had some questions about where they could get information about previous meetings that have been held on this project. If you go to the project website, which is listed on screen right now, and I'm sure Amanda will also post it in the chat, and you scroll down to past events and you click on individual meetings, there is a meeting recording linked to all of the previous meetings and meeting materials as well on the site. So that being said, I'm going to go to Jake Tabor. Jake.
Hi there. Can you
Hi.
hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I'm with an organization named Massachusetts Senior Action Council. I'm a community organizer. I'm not a senior, but there are I know that there are 3 members of our organization on the call tonight. If it's at all possible for them to speak, it would be great. I know that some of them have been having trouble with the technology and they may not have been able to raise their hands. So I would yield my time to Mary Napolitano, Louise Baxter, and Martha London. If they're still on the call. The rest of my time, that is, the 3 main questions I had after we reviewed this as an organization. So it's obvious that there's some good changes, but I want to know more about what the actual process was for ensuring that locations that are critical to seniors are getting service are in the new revised plan. I want to know what the municipality by municipality process was for taking a look at all the different spots that needed, close front door service for seniors and ensuring that that was kept. I also want to know what the process was to ensure that all of these new transfers are accessible. Was there a point by point? Did you review every new transfer to just sort of ensure, hey, is the geography challenging? Are we going to be able to have this open to seniors? And my last question, did the revised plan roll back some of the reductions in the number of stops? Or are you guys still reducing stops to increase frequency on some of these routes? Because I know that in some cases that's going to be a problem for seniors. Thanks, and I'd just encourage you to see if you can let Mary and the other folks ask some questions.
And actually, can you share with me the names? I heard Louise and I missed the other names. Oh, Jake, let me unmute you. Jake, what were the other names?
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say Mary Napolitano.
Okay.
Louise Baxter.
Uh-huh.
And Martha London.
Great, thank you.
There may be some others of our members on the call, but those are the ones that I saw.
We'll make sure we get to them tonight.
Yeah, I'll be able to respond to some of your questions, Jake. Thank you for coming to the meeting and for participating in the process. For bus stops, we are actively working to figure out how many stops in the system would need to be upgraded and where we would need to locate new stops for services that we are proposing. So there are some roadways in the network that don't currently have bus service on them. So we need to figure out where accessible stops would be located. And then for stops that exist now that will have service, there's the ongoing PATI program that we're working with in the Office of System-Wide Accessibility to figure out how we go about making stops accessible. In some cases, a stop in its existing location can be made accessible. Sometimes conditions don't allow for that. And this, as you know, and the stop has to be moved to a location that does provide for accessibility. So we're going through that process right now of figuring out all the capital needs for the new network. And that's also the case for transfer locations. So to your question about where transfers are happening, not every station in the system is fully accessible right now. If there are locations where we are anticipating transfers that are not fully accessible, we will be looking at how to make them accessible. So we're not taking the existing roadway conditions for granted necessarily. We want to make capital improvements throughout the network to improve accessibility and make stops accessible, make transfer locations accessible where we want to have them. So that's a process that is ongoing right now. We're also happy to continue to meet with folks from the Mass Senior Action Council to talk about all of these changes and the process. I think there's probably more content than that you'd like to get into, and we'd love to talk to you about than we can get through in this meeting. So we're happy to meet with folks at a subsequent meeting. But I think we can go ahead and call on the folks that you listed, if any of them are still here, Reagan.
Okay, I will call on Louise Baxter. I'm going to unmute you, Louise. Louise, are you able to? Oh, good.
The question's already. But like T12, I just wanted to make sure that it's where it's done for Boston Medical. But I think I'm glad that you did a lot to think about seniors and everything. And Bus 11 won't run as often. But I already spoke to about T12. I wasn't quite sure we're stopping for BMC. And I thank you for all the information you've given for the seniors.
Thank you so much for your comments. Mary, I'm going to see if Mary Napolitano, I'm going to see if you would like to unmute and share any comments. Mary.
Yes, I just had a couple of comments, questions. I know that the plan is not to have the 90 bus route stop at Sullivan Station. And I was concerned because I've spoken to workers in that area that depend on that 90 to get to Calumet Ave and come home get there in the mornings and home in the afternoons, that work in the Charlestown, the Sheriff's Workers Center, and just in that general area that have concerns about how they're getting home. And that was one question. And although another thing about the 90, if you're having it stop at Assembly Station, that's a hike to get over to like Trader Joe's in that area there, that strip mall. I found it difficult to get to the station to the 90 bus from the 90 over, let alone walk the extra distance. So you're cutting off people that really want to utilize that area, like I go to Trader Joe's, I'm gluten-free. There's certain things I only get there. And I was concerned about that. And also being on the 88 route, I have concerns, not for myself, because I don't go in town or a lot of different places over in that area, but we have 60, 70, and 80-year-old workers still on the Highland Ave area that need to go towards Leechmere. So you would take a 1 or 2 seat ride and make it 3 or 4 seats, which has me concerned because the 90 bus has never left early in the morning. It's always been around 6:30, 7 o'clock, which people working 7:30 and happen to make multiple changes would be late for work. So that was another concern, and they would have the same issues coming back home. And that was a concern of mine, not for myself, but for other individuals I know along that route.
Thank you so much for your questions and comments.
If I could jump in on a couple of those. The proposal is to have the 90 pull in closer to Assembly Station, but there still would be a boarding stop on Grand Union Boulevard, kind of right in front of the Trader Joe's. So maybe you could either kind of walk to Trader Joe's from Assembly Station in one direction, but when you have your groceries and you're ready to go back to Somerville, to Highland Ave or wherever, you only have to walk as far as Grand Union Boulevard, where the bus stop is today. And the proposal for the 90, it's intended to be, I'll call it like an 88 and 90 combination. So it would start earlier especially on Sundays, like on Sundays, the 90 today might only start at 10 o'clock in the morning and end at 6 o'clock in the afternoon or something thereabouts. The proposal is for it to have a full span of service with frequency of about every 20 minutes or better for most of the day, 7 days a week, and then maybe closer to every 30 minutes, like after 10 o'clock at night. So it's a much better frequency than what the 90 has today, as it's kind of taking on new functionality with some of what the 88 had formerly done.
Thanks so much, Melissa. I do want to remind everyone that if you are trying to make comments in the chat, to not direct message individual project staff members, but to direct your comments to the Ask a Question person. That way we'll make sure we will be capturing all of your comments and questions. I'm going to go to Colleen Murphy next. Colleen, you should be unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Hi, I'm a Winthrop resident. I have a question. Did I understand that what they're proposing is that the bus pickup for Point Street in the landing by the Winthrop Yacht Club?
We're proposing that the stop would be not in the yacht club, but in, what is it called? The ferry terminal in the parking lot where the boat launch is? The public boat launch?
It's not landing. I would like you to keep in mind that in the wintertime that is utilized for everybody in that area because there's not any on-street parking in winter with storms. In the summertime, that is a very heavily utilized docking for boats to go in and out all day long, and for the overflow for people to park on the beach. And I just wonder why the bus can't continue down, which is probably going it back. And
So I'm sorry, Colleen,
going
you keep
coming
breaking.
out. Is it because this?
You're breaking up, Colleen. I'm
so
sorry.
I just want you to keep in mind that that's a heavy. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Did you hear what I said about the landing? It's a public landing.
Okay, great. We did get that part. Some
It's
of
a
it
public
broke up.
landing that's heavily utilized. Huh? Can you hear me?
Melissa,
Hello?
I'm not sure how much of that you heard. It was coming in and out from me.
So we're not proposing to take the entirety of the parking lot. We were just hoping that we could pull into that lot as a way to get extra connectivity to, say, the Winthrop Ferry. This is actually a request we'd heard from the Winthrop Transportation Advisory Committee that we'd met with formally. I don't know if they're still meeting. This is going back probably a few years with some of the other folks, but there had been interest in getting service into that parking lot rather than having some of our services terminate at Winthrop Beach, kind of on the a little bit farther north of the yacht club area. And kind of one of the things that we're looking at with the loss in service, I can sense some frustration with the loss of service to the Point Shirley area. But one of the things that today with the service that sometimes goes out to Point Shirley, maybe every third trip during rush hours on weekdays, sometimes when you have multiple variants, and sometimes it's the long bus and the long route that goes all the way to Point Shirley, and sometimes it's the shorter route that serves the main portion of the peninsula of Winthrop. It creates bunching and irregularity in the schedule. So it might be that when you have the long bus coming through all the way from the point, that it's right behind one of the shorter buses, and having those when something like 96% of our ridership in Winthrop is not beyond the yacht club, but is rather in the sort of more populated portion of Winthrop, having the service out to Point Shirley can kind of create bunching and irregular gaps in service of there'll be a bus 2 minutes apart and then the next one will be 35 minutes later. We get these weird schedule irregularities when you have long and short variations of routes. So one of the things that we're trying to do is introduce more consistency and regularity so that the 96% of Winthrop riders would have better legible service, better frequency, evenly spaced trips. So that's the reasoning behind the proposal.
Thanks, Melissa. All right, I'm going to go to Clark Frazier now. Clark, you should be able to unmute.
Yeah, thank you. Try and make this brief. I want to say something about bus stops. As yesterday I was at Riverway Plaza in Weymouth on Route 220, and there was no bus stop sign. I had started one bus stop earlier, and there was no sign there either. I couldn't find it. I hope that you get crosswalks at every bus stop that's not at a signal. That's been a problem in Hingham. I just want to talk about schedules in general. I hope that you could go to, when you say regular interval, I mean really regular interval, like half hour, not 35 minutes, not 28 minutes, not 17 minutes, because that's what fits the buses. Is it true that the 220 would have half hours headway in the evening? And if so, what are you going to do about the red line where the headways are every 13 minutes? How could you possibly make a predictable connection? I mean, that's my biggest gripe about the MBTA, is how long it takes to get from point A to point B, because I have to wait at an unpredictable amount of time at intermediate points, meaning that I have to give myself an extra half hour or an hour to get someplace, because I don't know how long it's going to take for the connections. So my question is, what are you going to do about that? Can you do time transfer? Can you do more time points? You have better schedules? Can you do computer, electronic dispatching? So what are you going to do? Because I didn't see it in the mission statement. I didn't see anything about connections there.
Thanks so much for your comment. Melissa, I understand that there's a whole host of initiatives that are also happening in conjunction with Bus Network Redesign to improve the operations at the for buses. But I don't know if we want to speak to any of that or go to the next question.
If I could just take like 15 seconds. I know there's a lot of people in the queue, so I don't want to spend a lot of time, but one of the things we're trying to do is make more high frequency services so that that transfer experience can be better. Usually when things are, every 13 minutes in the case of the red line, those transfers can be less onerous. So that's what we're trying to do, is make more of those high frequency services. That's the short answer.
Thanks so much. I'm going to go to John Strauss. John, you should be unmuted.
Thanks, Reagan. This is John Strauss from Burlington, and very interestingly, the Burlington Transportation Committee was also holding a meeting. So I had two transportation meetings about buses going on at the same time, and everybody's very excited about the new bus Route 80, because we were concerned about the back and forth in Burlington itself between Chestnut Street and Middlesex Turnpike area. But I wanted to ask a couple of questions. One was just a concern of the length of time of the trip on the 80. That's going to be a long way for somebody that wants to go all the way into town to go through Woburn and then go down into Somerville and then get on the red line from there. The other question I had was also about connecting the biotech areas in Alewife to Burlington, because we built 3 new projects in Burlington, and one is actually in Bedford, but that's connected by the 351. And now with the loss of the 350, that direct connection is broken. So I was curious about if there was going to be, something addressed about that, because we do want to get rid of SOV trips. That's the basic motivation behind a lot of this. The last thing I wanted to bring up was the veteran services to the hospital in Bedford. Again, it's only got the 62 going there, and there are not really a good way to get from the surrounding communities to the Veterans Hospital. So you can just take those under advisement if you don't want to take the time now to go through all that. But those were the concerns that were brought up when you were discussing the switching of the routes.
So Melissa is nodding, and I'm assuming, and I know we're taking all these notes down, so I think we'll take those concerns with us. Is that right, Melissa? All right, terrific. I am going to go to Melissa Novitz. Melissa, you should be able to speak.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. I appreciate the previous comments on and the effort associated with the process thus far. But I was curious about the ability to revisit some of the community meetings, especially the T96 bus, as the May and October plans are dramatically different. I know tonight on this call, there are at least 5 direct abutters to the revised route, which are concerned about traffic, safety, and emissions with the high frequency service. So I'm curious if you could comment on the possibility of, revisiting community meetings for some of the impacted routes.
Doug, I'm gonna.
Yeah, I
turn it to
can
you.
respond to that. Thank you for your question. The change that we made in the T96 was in response to a lot of the feedback that we got from folks on Winthrop Street and George Street. What we had proposed back in May would have required a walking distance for a lot of the riders on those streets that, due to the terrain over there, obviously, as you know, it's Medford Hillside. Due to the sort of steepness of some of the streets, it would have been really challenging for folks to access the service as we had proposed it back in May. So we took that feedback from folks and modified the route accordingly. So we have it going on High Street and then to Winthrop. It continues to provide a service for Winthrop and George before getting on College Ave. So this was a change that was made in response to a lot of that feedback that we got, and we think is responsive to the bus ridership in that area. Melissa, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I took that question as being more of a process question, Doug, about certainly I can confirm that we had hundreds and hundreds of comments from the Medford Hillside community, and this was one of the things that was flagged in the letter to us from the mayor of Medford. So this was something that was really a priority for us. But I don't know if you want to tackle the process question there, Doug.
Yeah, we're certainly, we've been having meetings with both the city of Somerville and the city of Medford, the planning department in Medford, about a lot of these changes. So we will continue to meet with municipalities as we get into the implementation for these routes. And that can include meetings with community-based organizations and neighborhood associations as well to talk about these changes. But for that route specifically, that's the change we made to the route is one that we think is really responsive to the feedback that we got from folks there, but certainly happy to keep meeting with folks and talking about these changes.
Thank you, Doug. I'm going to turn to Matt Guyton. Matt, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, hi. I have a question about Route 67 in Arlington. I'm glad that you've restored it, but I'm wondering, is it possible to restore the section on Pleasant Street back so that it goes down Pleasant Street on the way to Elway?
Yeah, thanks for flagging that. And sorry I didn't have a chance to get to your question in our breakout group. We had a lot of content to get through. The reason for the diversion onto Massachusetts Avenue with the 67 was to fill in for that connectivity between Mass Ave and Alewife that was lost with some of the other changes to the network. So that's the rationale for why the proposal is what it is.
Thanks, Melissa. I do want to note, I know that we said at 8 that we were going to keep going, and I think, Doug, we're going to continue to keep going to take as many questions as we can until our interpreters need to stop tonight.
Yep.
All right. So Amriki Thomas, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. I've unmuted you though.
That was a pretty good pronunciation.
It wasn't bad? Oh, thank you.
I'm Omriki Thomas. I'm 14. I have a bit of a cold right now, so sorry if my voice sounds weird, but I just want to thank you all for doing this work. But I have a few comments. First of which, I'm very happy that the T47 is high frequency, though the terminus in Somerville near Union Square seems a little bit odd to me. And I think extending that and the 96, the T96 to Sullivan would be beneficial, especially as currently the 91 extends from Central to Sullivan, and that direct connection is helpful. One opinion I have is that I don't understand why the 74 came back. I feel like that is just, I've lived in West Cambridge. That seems to me like the people of West Cambridge are often speak a lot, and it seems like the loudest people are sort of getting the most in that circumstance. I would think that a better use of those resources would be to increase service on the 78. And maybe that spare bus can go, if there's extra service, can go somewhere else that needs it more. But instead of having the 74, I think having increased frequency on the 78, including later times, which is especially necessary and it serves more people, would be really helpful. A few other things. There were a few routes that I noticed were from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., which I don't really understand. That doesn't really serve like commuters to have routes from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. and weekdays only. That seemed odd to me. The two that I saw were the 439 and 451, which are the only transit to those communities. The 439 is the only bus that serves Nahant. It should probably, I would suggest that they also run on weekends, but only running at 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. is, I really think, not good for those routes. The 76, I think really could use the weekend service. Maybe returning the 6276 for weekend service, but it's the only transit to Hanscom Air Force Base, and I just really think that that should be included.
So Enrique, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. And we'll take those comments. And I also encourage you and everyone, if you have longer comments, to leave them in the comment form, because we certainly want to hear all of the thoughtful comments tonight.
And I'll just add to that, Enrique, some of us watched your entire YouTube video about the draft network that you made back in the summer. It was great. Really appreciate all of your comments and appreciate your engagement in the process. So thanks.
So I'm going to go to Tom Lamar, and Tom, you should be unmuted.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for your work on this project. I think there's a lot that's really good here. And I hope you'll be able to move forward pretty quickly with a lot of the recommendations here, with a robust public process to figure out some of the details. But I hope that's compatible still moving forward quickly, because there's a lot of really good stuff here. The specific point I wanted to make, Enrique actually may have said it better than I will, but I also wanted to mention the routing of the T96 and the T47 east of Union Square was a little confusing to me. I am curious if the intent is to partially serve as a connection to East Somerville Station, but I wanted to note that the bus stops there are on the other side of McGrath Highway from East Somerville Station. So while they're relatively close to East Somerville Station, almost a transfer, it's an extremely unpleasant walk. So I wanted to ask that you consider extending one or both of the T96 and T47 along Washington Street from Union to Sullivan. I think the T47 of those provides more valuable connections, replacing the old 91, but either one could be reasonable. And please keep in mind that Somerville has already added some bus priority and several traffic lights along Washington Street. It's plans to add more. So hopefully that provides a connection to East Somerville Station and the Sullivan Station while being a pretty efficient route. So please keep in mind the efficiency of that route, not just the distance. I think this might win out as more efficient route overall. Thank you. You're doing a great job, and I hope you can move forward quickly with this.
Thank you, Tom. I am going to go next to Emily. Emily Vites. Sorry, Emily, if I mispronounced.
It's Vedas. Thanks.
Vedas. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. So I wanted to talk about the 89, and I'm grateful that it's been brought back because people who live in Winter Hill do want to go to Davis Square a lot, and we don't want to have to walk there. But I'm really disappointed that it's still it's not a frequent bus. It's every half hour, and that means if you miss the bus, you're stuck there for an hour. I live a good 12-minute walk from the bus, so basically I have to get there 20 minutes early. So I'd like to ask why if you've taken the time to bring this bus back that everyone in who lives in Winter Hill wanted back, why you couldn't make it a more frequent bus that would really serve the community. Thanks.
I mean, the main reason was the resource constraints. We were working within a budget of 25% more operators than we already have to do all the things that we're talking about doing. And within our budget of plus 60 buses above what we had pre-COVID. So it was already an increase, but there were a lot of things that we were trying to do. So those were the different trade-offs that we were balancing. Somerville Broadway does get new high frequency service with the T101. And if you miss an 89, you can take a 101 and transfer to a 96. And there are other ways to make redundant trip transfers possible if you just miss a connection with the new network that we have.
Thanks, Melissa. I'm going to go to Charles next.
Good evening. I'd just like to say I think the new map is a very big improvement over the previous version, which previous version looked like it was drawn by a consultant who had never had to rely on bus service to get anywhere. That being said, while it is a big improvement, I would second Representative Connolly's request that you allow more public meetings, more time for us to digest this map. Someone said they had been working on this since 2018. Here in Cambridge, the first we heard about this plan was last spring. Excuse me. So I think it's important to have more opportunity for public comment and maybe get a third draft. A couple of comments about specific routes. Unlike previous commenter, I live in West Cambridge myself. I am very grateful that the 74 is coming back. You are proposing massive service cuts to our neighborhood. Having the 74 and the 75 will mean that it's potentially usable to ride transit in the midday as opposed to just the rush hour. I see the rerouting of the Burlington, Winchester, Woburn service. That's already a very long route. I sometimes use it myself. Right now it goes into Alewife. We're rerouting it into Davis through Medford. You're going to add 10 to 15 minutes to what's already a long route. And I think it'd be better to go into Alewife itself. Two other very quick comments. I think you're missing an opportunity of not extending the 71 to Newton Corner, where currently, if you want to go from, say, Harvard Square to Newton Corner, you have to either change or make a very long walk from Watertown, and the change involves crossing major streets. I think it would be very simple now. You don't have the trackless trolleys, just to extend the 71, make the loop around Newton Corner and come back to Watertown. So that's one suggestion. I think you're really missing an opportunity there. And another, I know that some of the residents of Cambridge have proposed that the 83 be extended from Ringe Avenue over the bridge on Alewife Brook Parkway to the shopping centers there on Alewife. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your feedback. It's much appreciated. I do know some folks want to ask some follow-up questions, but we're going to go through the people who haven't had a chance to speak yet first. They've been very patient this evening. Allison Poltinas.
Hi, good evening. A couple comments. And first, I want to thank you for the restoration of bus service on Heath Street between the VA hospital and Nubian Square. That's terribly important. And it was just crazy that it was going to be completely eliminated. It is the VA hospital that is served by that route. In the breakout session, I think Josh was focused on BMC, but don't forget the VA hospitals for sure. I just wanted to ask very specifically that the individual route maps be listed as PDFs on your website, because it's very hard to zoom in on some neighborhoods where there's multiple routes in order to see what particular streets are being used for those trips. Two follow-up concerns. Now that the route on Heath Street is going to be the 41 and it goes all the way to JFK UMass, that does make a long trip. And another new route that you're proposing starting in Brookline Village, the T12, is also a very long route. And long trips, as your operators have said, can affect them, but also it can obviously affect reliability. So I do remain concerned about that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and your feedback tonight. Okay, so I am going to go to Sasha Merstein. Sasha? Sasha?
Am I now off mute?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you all for the work that you're doing, trying to balance these multiple concerns. My comments today are about Brighton, which I was dismayed to find has been really left out in most ways. The one thing that we moved here for was the 501, and that is being cut back. I understand it's an express bus, and it's quite far from some of the initiatives of the project, and yet it is a bus that even now we're finding is poorly serviced. So to cut it back to just rush hour and away from Saturdays is in many ways to disconnect this part of the city from the downtown core. Similarly, the 65 that was to become the T15 was cut from Oak Square. I would hope you reconsider to stretch it back there as was previously proposed, and to make the connection to Ruggles through the hospital area that is otherwise very disconnected from Brighton. And then I would talk about the 86. I know I made some comments there. I, however, prefer to end my thoughts with a question pertaining to the bus hiring plan. Would you please comment on how you intend to do that? I understand that you're opening this to persons who do not currently hold a CDL and are trying to be nimble and flexible in meeting the opportunity to create high frequency routes throughout the city. But what are the numbers? How many drivers do you have now? when do you have plans to increase that by, say, 25%? And what is the phasing for how many drivers in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3?
Thanks for your question. So we don't have specific numbers by year. We do know, obviously, how many operators we have right now, how many we need to provide pre-pandemic service, and then ultimately how many we would need to provide the service that we're showing in this new network. So it's, maybe Melissa can bring up the exact numbers if you don't mind, Melissa. I don't have them in front of me, but it's something like a 50% increase in the number of operators that we have today is what is necessary in order to implement this full network. And that includes closing the gap between the number that we have today and the number that we would need in order to provide the pre-pandemic level of service that we have been providing. So there are a lot of initiatives underway at the MBTA to address the hiring practices for operators and look at what the actual job conditions are like and the impact that those may have on people's desire to be a bus operator. So folks are taking a look at everything from our hiring practices to the actual job itself and what it entails, so that we can figure out how to make the job more appealing, more accessible for folks who are interested in being bus operators, and then ultimately staff up to the level that we need. I believe we presented the numbers to the board of directors at their last meeting, but I don't recall the actual numbers. Melissa, do you have
We're
them?
pretty close. So just to get back to where we were pre-COVID, we need to hire about 300 bus operators, and then Bus Network Redesign, that was just over 400 operators. So about 700, I think 50 operators is what we're looking at over the 5 years of this to kind of catch up to where we were and then include that growth that we're looking to add. So that's a massive number. And in order to make that position more appealing so that we can be more competitive and find the talent that we need in order to make this plan happen, we're looking at a lot of different ideas on how to make the position more appealing and some other different things.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa, we have about 1,500 operators today, I think.
Right.
Thank you both. I'm going to go to Karen, but I also do want to emphasize, please, if you have a comment you want to make, please just use the comment form or post it in the chat and we will read it and we will retain it for the record. So Karen, I'm going to unmute you.
Hi, my name is Karen Chavez and I live in Winthrop, Massachusetts. I'm not sure exactly where Melissa DeLay and Doug Johnson are getting their information from, but the Winthrop Transportation Committee no longer exists. And the purpose of that committee was not to eliminate a bus stop down as far as Deer Island at Point Shirley, but to add a bus stop going into the public landing so that people would make use of the ferry. I don't believe that either one of those people on a cold day in December when there is a nor'easter has ever walked from Deer Island down to the public landing to get the bus. I think if they did, they would see the necessity of extending that bus route back down to Deer Island, or as we better know as the MWRA station. I am sorry that the MBTA and DOT has seen fit to eliminate that particular bus stop. I do not live at Point Shirley. I do not use the bus service in Winthrop, but I do have sympathy for all the people who live at Point Shirley who do use that bus service. And to walk that amount in a cold, wintry day is almost impossible. I do realize that they changed the stop from high tide, which is probably another quarter of a mile or so down the road up to the landing. Also, I think when you're commenting on what the town is, you don't say that it is just a stop. And it is the Winthrop Yacht Club. It is not just a stop on the way. I wish that the MBTA and the DOT would go back and look at this. I realize we do have a ferry that goes into Boston a few times a day, but that does not compensate the people who live on the other end of that ferry route. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I also want to note the time. It is 8:48. We have 12 minutes and we do have a hard stop at this meeting at 9 o'clock because of the availability of the interpreters. I see 5 people have their hands raised. We are going to get to as many of them as possible in the next 12 minutes. But I do want to share, as Doug mentioned, we are going to have a subsequent follow-up meeting. So there will be more opportunities to ask questions and provide feedback. As well as there is the feedback form. But I'm going to stop talking and get to more questions. Anita, I'm going to unmute you now.
Hello, my name is Anita Nagum. I live in Medford, previously in Somerville. I want to echo the comments of Rep. Mike Connolly. He's not my rep, but I applaud his statement. I think it's unacceptable to proceed with this plan, which has many changes in it, without a full and fair comment period on the new proposal. Some problems have been solved, but many others have been created. And I question whether proceeding without a full and fair comment period would actually meet federal requirements for public participation. I'm very glad that the 89 and 87 have been restored in Somerville. I was part of a group that was very concerned with this, but I am very concerned with what is happening in Medford. I've spoken with over 200 people since this plan came out last Thursday. About half knew about this proposal because of the efforts of my neighbor and me. Half had not heard of it at all. There are 2 main issues in Medford. First, West Medford will be left with very little service. On Boston Avenue, west of North Street, and on High Street, on Boston Ave, there will only be the number 80 bus, which is running at the lowest frequency, including every 90 minutes after 7 p.m. The 96 will not be going to Harvard Square as its terminus anymore, and the loss of service to Harvard Square is a major issue. There are many students and employees of Harvard that live in the area. In addition, you did not consider that Harvard Square is a main bus hub. Many people take buses to Harvard and transfer to other lines. The main campus of Cambridge Hospital is on Cambridge Street, accessible by the 69 bus from Harvard. In order for those of us in Medford who go there, we would have to now take 3 modes of transportation, or else take a bus, walk 1 or 2 blocks, and get on another bus. It is not a simple, it would not be a simple trip. 1 transfer was more than enough. You need to maintain access to the 69 bus for everyone who needs to get to Cambridge Hospital.
Thank you.
Those are all of my comments.
Thank you so much, Anita. Much appreciated tonight. I'm going to go to Celine Parker.
Thank you so much. And this, I'm a resident of West Medford as well, and this follows up really nicely from the earlier comments. Just wanted to mention that bus route 94 that currently runs between Medford Square and Davis Square and cuts through West Medford is also removed in the proposal. And that severely restricts access to Red Line for West Medford residents. And also with changes to Route 96, there's no longer a bus service between Medford and Harvard Square, which, as previously commented, is a frequent commute for many Medford residents. And I would like to suggest a potential solution to address both issues. That will be to reinstate bus route 94 as currently in place, which currently ends in Davis Square, and extend it to Harvard Square. So that will address the both issues in terms of not limiting access to Red Line for West Medford residents and also access to Harvard Square from Medford. And so I would really greatly appreciate if this option will be considered. And just want to add one more comment and finish with that. As someone who have used buses in both Medford and Cambridge, my personal observation is that buses that serve Medford are much more dated, creating both air and noise pollution. So I hope as part of this big project, renewing buses that serve Medford routes will also be seriously considered. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments. I think we have time for 2 more questions tonight. I see one from FHSU, which I'll call in a minute, and Emily. My apologies to anyone else who wanted to make comments tonight, but just wanted to flag that. So FHSU, I'm going to unmute you.
Hello, can you hear
Hello,
me?
yes, we can.
Yes, just quick question. It's a little bit confused on the changes on the route. So just give me a little brief summary at Everett Square. Before used to be 5 bus stop at Everett Square. So in the future, how many bus is going to stop in Everett Square?
Melissa.
Oh gosh, I'm on the spot. Well, it depends where you're going, because from Everett Square, you can now get to Chelsea, you can get to East Boston, you can get to Sullivan, you can get to a bunch of different places. Everett has a lot more connections to a lot of different places. So there might be multiple routes, but it sort of depends on which way you're headed. So
it will still be 5 routes, but as Melissa said, there are new connections that are created by the new network. So you'll be able to get to more places from Everett Square than you can today and a more frequent bus service. But the absolute number of routes is still 5 going through Everett Square.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Melissa. And Emily, I know had a follow-up question for Melissa for her question about Somerville. So Emily, you will be the last question of the night. And I'm just unmuted you.
Yeah, thanks so much. So, I wanted to follow up on the idea that that Winter Hill isn't a priority for the MBTA because of budget concerns, whatever. It's really not good to hear that. But also, I'd like to say that I'm sorry. It's really hard to hear that all the people in your neighborhood just will be getting in their cars. There was such a missed opportunity here to get people out of their cars and onto the buses. But there's no good way to get out of Winter Hill to get anyplace else. And it's such a shame. And I feel like I'm speaking for a lot of people that this redesign, while an improvement for many places, is not an improvement for Winter Hill. It's not an improvement for North Somerville. It's not an improvement for the environmental justice neighborhoods in North Somerville and East Somerville. And, I think the MBTA has to do better by us. That's it.
Thank you, Emily. I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate the comments of everyone tonight who has provided very thoughtful feedback and really good questions. Doug, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thanks, Reagan. Thank you, everyone who joined us tonight. We really appreciate your participation in this process, and the feedback that you've given us throughout it really did make the network much better. We sincerely apologize again for the issues we ran into earlier with Zoom and the maximum number of people that could be in one meeting. We will hold another meeting, and we will make sure that we don't run into a capacity limit again at that next meeting. We will notice that on the project website as soon as the meeting date has been selected. But for now, thank you all so much for participating in this. We really appreciate your time, and we wish you all a good evening.